Rajesh, bringing you back in, 5.5 hours ceasefire. Technically speaking, since you're a combat guy as well, what does it mean? Explain to our viewers, what does it mean? Does everything stop in terms of no bullets fired? There can be no shelling, no cruise missiles, nothing. And also, explain what these humanitarian corridors will look like. How will people be pulled out within 5.5 hours from all these places? Is there a plan in place, Rajesh?
Look, Shiv, if you remember, there were designated highways even in the past. This is the 10th day of war now. Even on the first 2-3 days, there were highways which were designated by the Russian army, saying that they will not be bombing those highways. Any vehicle moving on those highways will not be targeted. And I think this is just an extension of that thing. It was in place for last 10 days. And let me tell you, it was because of this thing being in place that most of the people in Kyiv, which is the biggest city of Ukraine with the biggest population, could move. Let me tell you, almost 90% people here have moved out to the west of Ukraine, Lviv, and then onwards to Poland and Germany, to other European countries. And remaining 5% are in the villages, the outskirts of Kyiv or a little away from Kyiv. It's only about 5% population which is willing to fight the Russians back, is staying back in the city. So it's almost 3 million people moving out of Kyiv. It would not have been possible had Russia not provided those safe highways or guarantee the safety that no car on those highways or the train will be bombed. And they did not bomb any train, by the way. This is the 10th day of war now. Shiv.
Absolutely. So, all of those different cities which are currently reported to be under siege, whether it is Kherson, Mariupol, where you were reporting from, Rajesh, to Kharkiv, where there are a lot of civilians apparently, Sumy, Chernihiv, all of these. Will this humanitarian corridor over the next 5 hours basically mean people being moved towards the borders? Where will they be moved, Rajesh?
Look, nobody's moving anyone. It's not like an Indian scenario that the government will be doing things and people don't do much on their own. Here, everything is being done by people themselves. They are moving in their own cars, in their relatives' cars, riding somebody's friend's car, or taking trains. Nobody's moving them. Ukrainian government does not have the wherewithal right now or the will to move these people. Also, let me tell you, Shiv, there's another factor to this. This migration which is taking place now is not only because of fear of war. There is a lot of economic migrants as well. And there are a lot of people who always wanted to go to Europe and work in Europe, but they did not have that opportunity because salaries in Ukraine are pretty low. And there are these economic migrants who will be moving to Germany and other European countries now. And EU has announced that they will be giving 3 years residence permit to all Ukrainian immigrants where they can work, they can study in European countries for next 3 years. So it may not be all people who are running away because they're afraid of the war. There will be a lot of people who will be moving out because of economic reasons. Also, let me tell you one thing. People who are in the east of Ukraine, all of them are not nationalists, and a lot of them support Russia and are of Russian origin. So they would prefer to stay back, maybe move to a safer place now when the war is going on, but they probably would not like to go across to west to Poland on those countries. So the mass migration will be more from central Ukraine rather than eastern Ukraine, where right now most intense fighting took place in last 3 to 4 days. Shiv.
Okay, Geeta continues to be with us. Just to clarify to our viewers that this appears to be a limited ceasefire, Geeta. That could be restricted. I just want to tell our viewers that this is we'll clarify that for you with the facts on the ground, but a temporary ceasefire in the eastern part of Ukraine, in the Sea of Azov area, is what we are hearing, Geeta, to basically allow people. Let me just read out for you what we're hearing. There are multiple corridors that are being activated apparently, but the Russian Ministry of Defense says it is halting its offensive at 10 a.m. local time on Saturday, so residents can leave the encircled Azov Sea city of Mariupol in the Donetsk People's Republic. The city has been controlled by Ukrainian forces since 2014. Another humanitarian corridor was established for the DPR town of Volnovakha, also controlled by Ukrainians. A safe passage for Ukrainians and Russians Moscow said that safe passage had been agreed on with Ukraine. Russians and Ukrainians met for a second round of peace talks in Belarus on Thursday. So humanitarian corridors being activated, but it appears that this ceasefire is being restricted to the eastern part of that country, the eastern part of the country, Geeta.
Absolutely. That certainly makes a lot of
sense
now, Shiv. That makes sense, because the areas that you just mentioned are all either Russian-speaking, Russian origin, or pro-Russian areas, which means that Putin administration is trying to ensure that their people, their supporters, and that they do not lose support. Now, let me tell you, in the like Rajesh said, in the eastern parts, Shiv, most of them are Russian-speaking, of Russian origin, or Russian supporters, right? And if they continue the attacks that they did in Kharkiv, Kharkiv also had a lot of pro-Russian people. So if they continue the kind of attacks in Kharkiv, Russia was losing support on the ground. And that's the reason why the ceasefire, to allow people to move, not walk all the way to the western side, but maybe give them corridors to move towards the eastern side and evacuate. And then have that entire refugee homes that they keep talking about, where people have moved in because of the onslaught by the Ukrainian side. So the ceasefire on the eastern side completely makes sense, because there is a swell in terms of disenchantment with Russia amongst the people of Russian origin. And Putin administration certainly would not want that at a time when he's trying to make a buffer state, which he already has made with Donetsk and Luhansk, but widen it further in case the West Ukraine continues to maintain that they'd like to be a part of the European Union, or for that matter, not give up the idea of being a part of NATO in the future. If that continues, this is going to be a country that will see civil strife shift for a long, long time. It is not going to end anytime soon. And it looks like a very scary scenario if this continues. But we do know what Russia is aiming at. Russia is aiming at to ensure that there is a state within a state that continues to remain pro-Russia. And that's why this very brief ceasefire, because I couldn't really fathom or understand why and how a 5-hour ceasefire would allow a huge number of people to really move from eastern Ukraine into the western parts. So a strategic move there, but one that might not be convincing enough for the international community, or even for that matter for Ukraine. This, Shiv, even as negotiations are to take place between the two sides. So we'll have to wait and see how the two sides really negotiate an understanding. But at this point in time, at this juncture, the way Russia is going about trying to send out a very strong signal to Ukraine is something that is violative of all international laws, all international rules. And Russia will certainly have to be answerable and held accountable for the actions that it has taken against a sovereign nation, Ukraine. Their decisions are there alone. And over here, the people are absolutely in panic. Most of them moving out. Millions have already moved out and have become refugees in the Central Europe, Eastern European countries, eastern side of Europe, the countries there. So it is going to be a complete disaster, so to say, in terms of how the entire situation and issue has been handled with Ukraine. For now, what we're looking at is lots of people, even as we see that it is somewhat morning over here, where buses have now started flying, trams have started flying, and you'll see people with suitcases walking down every street. What are they doing, Shiv? They're just trying to take a bus or a cab, a taxi. There are a lot of volunteers around Lviv who are just volunteering to drive them down to the border posts and then cross over. So it is a very, very scary scenario for families such as this, who are just walking past me, Shiv, just trying to get to a safer location. Many I speak to over here say we do not know whether if Lviv is going to hold on or not. and that's why a lot of people moving. Most of them over here could very well be from eastern Ukraine, because people here in Lviv are trying to extend assistance, but there are many who are leaving Lviv as well. Only knowing that this Russian aggression is not going to stop anytime soon. So a scary scenario for people of Ukraine, but also one where we do not see any international support. You know, all the talk about extending support and sending weapons and aircraft, Shiv, will not hold. We've seen a nuclear plant attacked.
Stay with me, Geeta. Stay with me. Stay with me. I want to just read out. I want to read out for our viewers. Very, very important. People watching, we're going to give you the most accurate information. So I'm going to read out word for word what the Russian Ministry of Defense has just said in its statement announcing a ceasefire in 2 cities in eastern Ukraine for the next 5.5 hours. The Russian Ministry of Defense has said it is halting its offensive at 10 a.m. local time on Saturday, so residents can leave the encircled Azov Sea city of Mariupol in the Donetsk People's Republic. The city has been controlled by Ukrainian forces since 2014, says the Russians. Remember, those are these places. This is where Donetsk is. This is where Mariupol is. This is... Okay, let's come to me so I can show our viewers this map. This is the eastern part of Ukraine, parts of it which are rebel and pro-Russian. Mariupol is what the Russian MOD is talking about. They're saying that they are going to effect a 5.5-hour ceasefire. So civilians in this area are able to get to safety. Let me complete that statement from the Ministry of Defense. Another humanitarian corridor was established for the town of Volnovakha, also controlled by Ukrainians. Moscow says that safe passage had been agreed on with Ukraine. Russians and Ukrainians met for a second round of peace talks in Belarus on Thursday. Mikhail Podolyak, a member of Ukraine's negotiation team, confirmed earlier that the two sides had spoken about the possibility of temporarily ceasing hostilities in order for civilians to evacuate. So remember that Ukraine's map right now is replete with cities that are completely under siege. Let's come to me so I can show our viewers once again. The Russian Defense Ministry clarifying on that ceasefire. It was believed initially to be a full-scale ceasefire all across, but that's not the case. They've basically mentioned the cities of Mariupol and Volnovakha. These 2 cities is where the ceasefire has been affected, and it is civilians from these 2 cities who will be getting humanitarian corridors to move out. But what about humanitarian corridors in the other parts of Ukraine, which are currently seeing a lot of fighting? Whether it is Sumy, where there are lots of Indian students, whether it is Kharkiv, which has been bombed and is currently on its knees, whether it is Kiev, the outskirts of which are being bombed, including places like Bucha and Irpin are being, Zhytomyr is being bombed as well. We're seeing other places, including Chernihiv, which is seeing some of the worst fighting. A lot of civilian casualties in Chernihiv as well. Konotop has also been bombed. Many of these places, apart from Mariupol, are seeing a lot of civilian casualties as well. So it's interesting to note, as Geeta just said, that Russia has only affected and announced a ceasefire for this particular area. As she said, it's part of the rebel provinces, very close to the rebel provinces, lots of Russian or pro-Russian populations in these areas. So Russia has announced a ceasefire for humanitarian corridors in this place alone. We will see whether that ceasefire expands to other parts of Ukraine, but for now the press release only mentions those 2 cities of Mariupol and Volnovakha. There is a context to it as well. Let's go back to Rajesh Pawar, who continues to be with us. Rajesh, if you can continue to hear me now, the ceasefire has been clarified. It's not a full country ceasefire. It's a ceasefire only in the Mariupol Sea of Azov area for civilians to be able to escape via a corridor. What do you think, Rajesh?
You're absolutely right, Shiv. This you have to read between the lines.
Yeah.
This is not a complete ceasefire. This is a ceasefire only for 2 cities. And right now, the Russian forces are advancing at their maximum pace in the south of Ukraine, where there is no ceasefire. They are just 30 kilometers away from the next nuclear power plant of Ukraine, which is Yuzhno-Ukrainsk. And if they reach that power plant, they will be in control of almost the second biggest nuclear power plant there in Ukraine, plus Chernobyl. They are approaching that nuclear power plant very fast pace at this time when you talk, and their advance in the south has gained momentum in last 24 hours. So fighting is still going on in south of Ukraine as well as in east of Ukraine as we talk, and the advance of the Russian forces, ground forces in south of Ukraine has gained momentum, and they are just 30 kilometers away from the next nuclear power plant of Yuzhno-Ukrainsk. Shiv.
Okay, very important. I also want to get in a word from Olga Vorozhbit. She is live with us from Lviv on what's happening at this point. Olga, what are you hearing? A ceasefire just been announced by the Russian Ministry of Defense for the cities of Mariupol and Volnovakha for civilians to get out from there. It's a 5.5-hour ceasefire that has been announced. Olga, what do you think about this?
Call me just in 2 minutes.
Okay, we'll go back to Olga. Olga, can you hear us? Okay, we'll get back to Olga in just a minute. Rajesh, if you're still with me, 5.5 hours for the cities of Mariupol and Volnovakha in the eastern, provinces. What does that mean? Will people be getting out from there now? This is a city where you were. It was being shelled even when you were there a few days ago. What do you think will happen over 5.5 hours, Rajesh?
Look, the reason why Russian army is passing these advisories or these warnings that civilians should vacate, because, as I said, you have to look at the military angle of it. Russians so far have not bombarded any civilian area in Mariupol or the other city you mentioned. There is a lot of Ukrainian right-wing militia in these cities, like in any other city in Ukraine right now. So in case there is a fire coming from, if your Russian army on ground draws fire from any of the residential areas, they will just bomb it out. And that is the reason exactly they're asking civilians to move out so that there is no civilian casualties. And as Russian army has leveled allegations on Ukrainian militia again, that they are using residential areas and residential complexes to fire on the Russian ground forces. This can be a part of military tactics as well. Over to you, Shiv.
Okay, does this have any implications at all ceasefire-wise, Rajesh, for places like Kharkiv and Sumy and Chernihiv, or does it not affect that at all?
Look, listen, Shiv, I don't know. Let me clarify this for other people as well. These are very small cities. Mariupol probably would have a population of not even 500,000. It will be much less than that. So, and most of the people have already moved out in last 10 days. So there are not many people moving out from these two cities. The reason why they declared this is militarily. It has a military reason rather than humanitarian reason, because people who had to move out had already moved out. We were there about a week back, and we saw that most of the civilians had already moved out when the bombing of the airport took place in the city about 9 days ago. So the reason why Russians have advised or warned people to leave the cities or provided this humanitarian corridors has more to do with military operations than humanitarian reasons. And I have explained to you, the militia have been using residential buildings, the residential quarters of the city to fire on the ground forces on the Russian troops. And now if this happens, after this warning expires, they will blow up that building so that they can somehow stop these militia from firing from these residential areas, and in the process, they do not kill innocent civilians. Over to you, Shiv.
Okay, this is extreme. It's very important to get this as accurate as possible, because as Rajesh consistently has pointed out, there is a lot of misinformation, a lot of information falls through the cracks. It's a dynamic situation which is shifting very in front of our eyes. So we don't want to get these crucial pieces of information wrong. The Ministry of Defense of Russia has specifically said that this ceasefire is restricted to Mariupol and Volnovakha, which are in eastern Ukraine, part of the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine. Large parts of those are pro-Russian as well. So there's a context to what's happening. Could this also mean humanitarian corridors in other places? Because the two countries have held talks, and in their second round of talks, they did discuss the possibility of a cessation of hostilities, allowing civilians to move out from different places. But the Ministry of Defense of Russia has specifically named only two cities. So a question mark over what happens in the rest of Ukraine.